Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Knowmads Podcast. I'm your co-host, Bhavya.
And I'm your co-host, Prati.
Now, have you found yourself in a situation when you're passionate about something, you've learned to appreciate it, and you've loved it from a very, very young age, but then life happened? Our guest today had studied mechanical engineering and physics back in his undergrad, and he had to make a circumstantial decision to move to the finance industry. He then spent more than 6 years in that industry and decided to come back to school to pursue his love for physics.
Tripp Moss, welcome to the Knowmads Podcast.
Thank you, guys. I'm so excited to be your first guest here.
So let's just start from the beginning. You double majored in electrical engineering and physics. Mechanical, okay. Mm-hmm. Mechanical engineering and physics at the University of Vanderbilt. So how about we start with you telling us why did you decide to major in these two subjects?
Yeah, well, I think that's an easy one. Most of the people in this program, I think, really discovered a love of science at a really young age. Right, and I'm not an exception. When I was in, elementary school, like even kindergarten, I remember watching a Nova documentary, and it was about quantum strangeness. And that was the first time I had seen, particles being in two places at once, and they talked about the two-slit experiment. And I just remember as a kid, it was like, this is the coolest sci-fi story, but it's all real, right? This is the real world. And I just fell in love with it. And so I knew that I was going to be a scientist my whole life, right? I knew that was my path. I really loved the elegance of the math in physics, as I think a lot of us do. And so going into university, I knew I loved physics. In the back of my mind, kind of wanted to, maybe be Iron Man one day, right? And build really cool shit. And so I thought mechanical engineering was a great thing to pair with that. Looking back, I put a lot on my plate. I put a lot on my plate at a difficult university, but I don't think I have any regrets.
Could you also talk about the physics aspect of the degree? I mean, when did you decide to do the double major?
Right. So I knew I was going to do physics from the get-go, right? And I also knew that I didn't really want to waste my time, per se, on things like history or or language requirements. There was a big language requirement at Vanderbilt. And at that point, I was still pretty good at Spanish. I learned a lot of Spanish in high school, and I just didn't want to go through intro Spanish classes again. And so I realized that if I double majored through the engineering department, I could eliminate all of those requirements. And I thought it was this great idea that I'd only be doing math and science. Well, by the time I got to my junior year, I was taking like advanced quantum, advanced calculus, fluid dynamics, compressible dynamics. Like every class was just a beast.
Oh my God.
And so I had to work really hard. Yeah.
Okay.
What's the difference between double majoring and having physics as a minor?
Right. So if you were to take physics as a minor, there's just like a small spattering of classes you have to pass, right? And I'm not even sure if there are defined courses that you have to take. You probably just have to reach like an hour requirement.
Right.
As a major, you have to take all of your foundational stuff, right? You've got to take your quantum, you've got to take your E&M, all that good stuff.
You were very young when you, this was right out of undergrad when you decided to work. You started working, this was 2015 when you started working as a stockbroker for UBS. And you worked there for a good 2 years, I think. More than 1 year.
Yeah, definitely. A little bit over a year at UBS, yeah.
Right.
Kind of cutting my teeth in the industry.
So why do you think it was necessary for you to start working right after your undergraduate? And, if you can talk about the circumstances that led to that decision.
Yeah, I'm gonna tackle that from two sides, right? Okay. First is, getting into the role and why I wanted to start working right off the bat in finance. And then I'm going to address why I chose finance rather than science, right? I think those are sort of two different conversations. So the job at UBS, I knew that I wanted to work as soon as I could out of college. I knew the value of making an income early in life. I come from a really fortunate family that instilled good values in me and kind of grounded me in what it takes to be successful. So I knew that it was really important to get a good job out of college. That particular job at UBS, when you're going into finance, especially if you have sort of a longer term career vision, your first job is going to suck. You basically get all the grunt work. You take that as an opportunity to pass your certifications, right? Because you have to be sponsored by a bank to even take the tests. So that's what I used my first year for. I was in a call center. I was fielding calls from angry customers all day long. Half of the things that I did were resetting passwords. The other half was explaining tax consequences of trades to people who really didn't care about it and just wanted to yell, right? But that was my opportunity to sort of get in on the ground level at UBS, passed all my certifications as a stockbroker, and I made it very clear to them that I was taking this as a stepping stone to become a wealth manager. Like, hey, within the first year, I'm looking to move on to a wealth manager position. So I was really transparent with them. When the year mark came around, I was the most productive member of my group in the call center.
Awesome.
So they basically told me that they couldn't let me leave. They're like, if you leave, we're not going to be able to.
Probably the youngest.
Oh, I was definitely the youngest. Definitely the youngest, and like doubling the productivity of some people that were there.
Wow.
So they basically told me that I couldn't leave, and I said, well, I was straightforward with you guys, so I'm quitting. Okay. And I quit UBS and applied to a number of different firms for wealth management positions. I was offered a job at Edward Jones, which is a really, I think they accept maybe like 8% of applicants into the wealth management role. So I was very excited. It's a great company. And that's sort of how I got started in the industry. Okay. Now, as for why I chose to go into finance afterwards.
Yeah, so you talked about your love for physics, right?
Yes.
That you loved engineering and physics. And I mean, what led to this kind of, leave your love and move on to the other side?
Absolutely. So this is a story that I've really not told very many people before. There are a couple of people in the department that are aware of sort of my path through life. During undergrad, I got to about upperclassmen courses. My course load really picked up. Everything that I was taking was really hard. I was super busy. And during that time, a very close friend of mine, a very close family friend, was diagnosed with terminal cancer, with lung cancer. And so during my upperclassmen years, he passed away. And my family, we really just kind of saw him wither away. It was really very difficult. And so I just found myself, I couldn't focus on school. I was struggling with mental health. It was a really hard time in my life. And so my senior year grades I almost failed out of university. I mean, because I didn't spend very much time on campus because I was in Memphis visiting our family friend as he was dying. And so the Vanderbilt University kind of looked at me and said, well, he's been a great student up until this time. His senior year's been really tough. They kind of just graduated me and helped me out the door, right? Which I'm grateful for, and that opened up doors for me in my life. But I sort of looked at myself at the end of my senior year. I was not in a good headspace to start a PhD program. I really thought that if I tried to do that, I would ruin it. I would fail at my dreams. And so I made the decision to try to get a job. And I knew that finance was a great place for physicists. They love mathematicians, right? So I decided, you know what? I think I can make it as a wealth manager, and that's a great career path. And so maybe someday, once I make some money, I'll go back to science. That was always in the back of my head. Okay. But sort of that's what pushed me that direction.
Yeah, that's interesting. Do you think the university handled it very well?
Vanderbilt? Absolutely not.
No. Okay.
That might be like a personal perspective, and I'm sure they had resources for people that needed to talk to someone, but I certainly didn't take advantage of them. And I think a big failing was my advisor, that I was in a position double majoring in mechie and physics where even if everything went perfectly, it was going to be really hard. Right. I think that if I had taken more time as a freshman to dig into what I loved and what I really wanted to do, I never would have double majored. I would have just done physics and then maybe a minor in engineering or something like that give myself an easier time, right? But hindsight's 20/20. Yeah.
That must have been really hard.
It's tough. I mean, everyone grows a lot in college. I think you really discover yourself as a person, and you change a lot, you know? So I'm sure I'm not unique in having hard times in university.
Okay. And you talked about that you started working for Edward Jones in 2017. How was that like?
Edward Jones is a fantastic company. When I was there, they were consistently rated either first or second in the world, I think, for happiest employees.
Wow.
For a Fortune 500 company, right? They're well known to be an awesome company. But as a wealth manager, just the way that career works is you bust your ass for the first 3 or 4 years. I mean, you're building your practice from the ground up. So I worked really, really hard. And I definitely had some imposter syndrome, right? I was this young 23-year-old guy in a suit. Early on, the way you find clients oftentimes is door knocking. So I would go to suburbs. I'd go to neighborhoods, knock on their door, hand them my card and say, hey, hi, I'm Tripp Moss. I'm a wealth manager and I want to help you with your retirement plan. You know,
this is prepubescent Tripp.
Yeah, I had my first chin hair going on, you know. But, you know, the truth is that helped me build a lot of confidence. I had to. It was sink or swim, right? I had to become confident in my ability, and I had to build some resilience to being told no. You know, if you're in a neighborhood knocking on doors, you might talk to 100 people in one day, and all of them tell you to go away. You know, and that's just something you deal with. But you find that one person who really trusts you, and you can help them with their long-term plan, and then they're your client for 10 years, right? That's sort of the way you build a wealth management practice.
Okay.
So you're continuously choosing careers that come with imposter syndrome.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I'm just now getting over it in physics, right? For sure. No, you're definitely right.
But honestly, it was a very logical decision. Statistically speaking, most of the PhDs, even after physics and mathematics, end up going to finance because these finance giants just love, you know, people who can solve problems. Not physical problems, but some real world shit.
Yes, absolutely. And like what I realized pretty quickly when I was at Edward Jones, the vast majority of wealth managers, they can't do high school math, right? They're They're not mathematicians, they're salesmen, right? They're really good at telling people what they should do and convincing them to work with them.
Right.
Not necessarily good at problem solving. And so, you know, that's one of the things that I was sort of disillusioned with is I wanted to be the guy that built awesome strategies and like analyzed companies and this is the stock that's going to take off in the next 5 years. But that's not what the industry's about. And honestly, as a responsible financial planner, that's not what you should be doing.
Right.
You know, you should really be planning for your clients and helping them meet their goals, right?
So for our listeners, Tripp married his beautiful wife, Annie, in 2021. Y'all have
Today is our anniversary.
Oh, happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary.
We have a nice dinner planned tonight.
How many years?
3 years.
3 years
wow.
now, yeah. Y'all have a great house. You're incredible hosts. Thank you for hosting all the graduate parties.
Thank you.
We owe you. So was the decision to come back to school, was it before marriage or after marriage?
It was after marriage. And I mean, thank God for my beautiful wife being flexible with me and really embracing my dreams, right? Because when I decided to switch back to physics, I was 4 years into my wealth management career, which is I put all the hard work in, right? Yeah. And I got to the point where my practice was built. I had a client base. All of my new clients were coming from referrals. So like people that were really satisfied with me and telling their parents, hey, work with this guy. So that's the dream. But I reached that point and I just had this really clear vision of what my life was going to be for the next 30 years.
Right.
And I knew that it's just not what I wanted. And I missed science. I missed math. I'll never forget that we took a big Christmas and New Year's vacation down to Costa Rica. Annie and her family and me.
Wow.
It was so much fun. And in my downtime, I just started dabbling with some old theories that I worked on in university.
Oh, wow.
You know, some old notebook of like, I was going to unify electromagnetism, right?
I've heard some of them. So.
Oh, yeah. I think we all probably have at some point. But I was just going through Maxwell's equations and like adding terms to try and make it satisfy, you know, different, you know, the diffusion equation or all these different things. And I just had forgotten how much I loved it, right? And so I had a conversation with Annie of like, look, this is where I see myself in the future. My dream is to be a physicist. I've made us enough money that we're secure. I want to go back to school and live my dream. And she supported me every step of the way, which not a lot of wives would be okay with someone giving up a 6-figure salary, right?
You're
right. In perpetuity, right? For the rest of my life. So she's just been amazing. Yeah, and super supportive.
I mean, what you're saying, doesn't grad school pay you a lot?
A lot in moral victories. Yeah.
A lot of work.
So what was the reaction like? Like, what was the initial reaction?
The initial reaction when I brought the conversation up was surprise, right? Okay. I think that was she expecting something like that to happen? Like, did she have any idea? No, and honestly, when I was working in that Costa Rica vacation, when I was working on all that old stuff in my old notebooks, that was the first time that she was able to really see my passion for science. I think it was surprising for her because the Tripp that she knew was the clean-cut suit Tripp who talked about growing his business and stressed about whatever client was giving him problems and checked the stock market every 30 minutes to see what was going on. And we definitely had this vision for our future where I was going to be the stay-at-home dad and work 3 days a week, right?
Okay.
Golf with my clients and take the kids to daycare and all that stuff. And then she was going to be the dentist working hard. And we had this life plan. So it was definitely a surprise for her. She had to reevaluate what our future was going to look like. But she could just see how passionate I was. She could see that it is a part of me. It always has been. I've always been a physicist. And I think that she really appreciated seeing like that full side of me. And now I don't think she could see anything different, you know? Now I am truly the physicist of the family, right?
And I'm sure the planning, your family planning must have taken a step back when you decided to go back to school.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, right now we're talking about kids and planning for it. Before I went back to school, I mean, it pushed our family planning back probably 3 years or so, 3 or 4 years. But that's honestly been a good thing. I don't think that we were ready to be family planning back when we were. It was just that our life was in a place where we had that as an option. And we've been able to enjoy ourselves. You know, we've had like 3 or 4 more years of taking vacations every summer and, you know, doing fun stuff. And so now we're thinking of pushing it back another year or so just so we can knock out the last of our bucket list before we have our first kid.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be so hard in grad school. And while she's working full-time, taking care of the whole family, and with 3 pets.
Yes, and the pets. You know, poor Dipper, he just can't do anything on his own. That's our golden doodle, is a big nugget of a dog.
Oh, he's the cutest. So, when you started, when you decided that you're going to go to school and you started going to school, what were your thoughts about it? Were you like scared of entering that same place again?
Oh, I was terrified. I was absolutely not. I wasn't terrified of falling into the same place in undergrad. At that point, I had really gained. My time as a wealth manager gave me so much confidence. I really found my own self-confidence, where I don't base my self-worth on other people's opinions anymore. It literally doesn't faze me. If someone tells me that they think I'm an idiot,
to get.
Doesn't matter. Falls right off.
Yeah. That's what you get by knocking on doors. That's what you learn. So.
Exactly. Yeah. But I think I was more afraid that I wouldn't be able to hack it. You know, I had been out of the field for so long. I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to do calculus. And that certainly was a big problem when I first started taking classes. I had to crash course, get myself back up to speed. And now I really do feel the confidence where I'm past my imposter syndrome. I feel like I'm a strong mathematician. I feel like I have a strong understanding of physics. And yeah, I guess I was just more scared that I was going to take that leap. I was going to start working towards my dream and then I wasn't going to make it, right? Everyone has that kind of anxiety, I think.
Yeah. I mean, with physics, it's true. Like you said, there's a lot of skills that you need to have. Intuition is very important. You need to understand, the fundamentals of physics in order to actually do it. And it always scares anyone who maybe decides to join grad school and wants to become a physicist.
And once you're like starting your research, the first couple of months in something new is always so intimidating. Like you don't know anything. And the more you know, you get one step closer to what you want to do, and then you realize, oh my God, I don't know this.
Right. Well,
and it's like a constant cycle of the more you know, you find out that the less you know.
There's a curve, right? What's the name of that curve where, on the x-axis you have your knowledge of the subject. On the y-axis you have your confidence in your knowledge of the subject. It always starts out really high and then falls off. And eventually we just hope to hit that learn enough that you can start to really understand something.
It's an exponential drop and then it's never back up.
That's right.
How confident we were in undergrad that, oh my God, I can do anything.
I'm going to change the world.
Like I'm going to change the world. I'm going to I'm going to find the grand unified theory, and then you realize, I don't know Maxwell's equation. What's happening?
Well, I don't know calculus.
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and I go back and look at the old, my notebook stuff. It's fun. It's interesting to think about, but I realize that none of it is like relativistically invariant, which is, as a physicist, that's a big no-no, right? But at the time, I didn't know any better, right? I was just getting cool results out of it. It could have totally just been like a reference frame thing, right? But looking back now, I see that I've grown, right?
The question is always, is it Lorentz invariant?
And the answer was no.
That's great. So once you decided to come back to school and you were ready, you were prepared, I'm sure a lot of so this is talking about finances. I'm sure a lot of financial dynamics at home changed because from going to a 6-figure salary to a 10-figure salary in grad school.
Absolutely changed. I mean, and one thing that made it.
How did that conversation happen with Annie, and how did the dynamics change, and how did that conversation pan out?
Because like grad school barely pays anything.
Yeah, barely pays anything, and in fact, my first year, I was a pre-grad. So So for the first
you paid out of pocket, right?
2 semesters, I paid out of pocket, right, and didn't have a job, right. I was.
How much was that?
Something like $5,000 per semester. I took 2 classes per semester. It was a little under $5,000 each time. But yeah, going from making, close to 6 figures, and then spending, right? That was a big change. And when I first brought it up, I mentioned that Annie kind of had to really come to terms with what the future was going to look like if we made this change. And finances were like the big talking point. She was just coming out of her dental school. And so I don't think that she was expecting to be like the sole earner of the family. She was really looking forward to us both being young professionals and being able to support each other. But as a financial planner, I sort of knew how much flexibility we had. I knew how to budget for everything. And at the end of the day, Annie makes more money than I did as a dentist, right? So it wasn't a horrible transition. We certainly could do better about not taking so many vacations, but you got to live your life. No, it was a transition. It was a change mostly in Annie having to be okay with being the one that was responsible for supporting us, right? And it was no longer my job to be paying all the bills, right?
And was she from the get-go, was she completely comfortable, or did she have...
once we made it through that like intro period of maybe a month of talking through it, are we going to do it? What's it going to look like? When she really saw how serious I was, I mean, she was on board 100%. She said, it's my time to help you make because her dream is to be a dentist, right? And I supported us until she made that happen. She said, it's my time to help you make your dreams come true. I mean, she has been amazing with the transition.
Oh, so when you were in finance, she was at school. Okay.
Exactly.
Oh, right. Oh, okay.
that was fun for me. Being, knocking on doors, like, if I don't get a client today, we might not eat dinner,
So, in terms of department, were your expectations met?
I will say one thing that I've been so surprised with at the University of Houston is the caliber of our professors. I mean, we have I didn't realize that we had some of the best professors in the field for things like superconductivity, things like nuclear physics. I mean, we have some really outstanding professors driving the field. So I was really surprised. I didn't really know the first thing about U of H when I applied.
Yeah.
The reason I applied to Rice and U of H because I lived in Houston and those were my options, right? Yeah. And I'm just so thankful that I have ended up at a great department and with a group that I'm really excited about. And then I think just the grad process in general was a little surprising. I didn't know what to expect with TAing. I didn't know what to expect with...
that was hard.
Yeah, the first year is hard, right? But I no regrets, man. I'm so happy that I'm here. Every day, I love that I get to go in and talk about science, Yeah. And I've loved teaching. I don't know how you guys have felt about the TA experience. I've really enjoyed teaching.
I'm going to start teaching again in June?
June.
Yeah.
All of us are.
Yeah.
All right. Yeehaw.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed it too. I mean.
It's a fun experience. Like, we've never formally taught like a class.
Yeah.
Right.
So many students, and especially because, again, University of Houston is so diverse. You have so many different students from so many different backgrounds.
So many.
And it's so hard. You literally have to tackle each with a different approach. So that was interesting. But because we were first semester, a lot of courses, even though the first semester courses weren't that hard, but with TA and everything, the time management, that was a lot.
Yeah, I agree that I don't think that the material was the hardest part of the first year. I mean, obviously we covered graduate level physics. Yeah. Some of the material was hard, but the toughest thing was just managing your time.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's the first time in my life that I think I mentioned this to you guys a few weeks ago. It's the first time in my life that I've literally not had enough time to do all the things that I need to do.
Yes.
Work straight through the week, grade on the weekend, go back into the week.
Oh,
Just
yeah.
If you get behind it all, you're hosed. So
that's
something I had to adjust to, and hopefully next semester is a little bit easier. Hint, hint, wink, wink.
We didn't talk about your transition from Nashville to Houston.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Oh boy. Do you want the long version or the short version?
The long
the
version.
longest version.
The longest version.
The explicit version.
Yes. So I had mentioned that I was struggling with some mental health issues, right, coming out of the end of university. That job in UBS did not help. I was living alone in Nashville in a single apartment. That's when I got my cats because I was just lonely and needed some company. And then the job itself, I don't know if you're familiar with being in a call center, but you just get absolutely berated all day long. Everyone calls and yells at you.
In fact, we have.
Have you really?
Yeah.
we worked at a call center. This was back in Newcastle in England. And this was right out of our master's. We were actually working, it was a government contract. It was business and industrial strategy. Her Majesty's business and industrial strategy.
Oh my gosh, it's very colonial.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
This exactly. So this is like at the time, when Brexit was happening. So we used to get calls,
From businesses.
From businesses about, and these were like, some of them were reactors and stuff. Hey, what do I do with my
Yeah, it's like,
dude, don't talk to me, man.
like, I do not need to make that decision. Oh man.
Yeah.
And then it's always a problem, right? They never call to say like, "Hey, you guys are doing great for me." No.
Never. Oh my God. And it's calls after calls after calls.
Yes. Yeah. Well, so anyways, that's where I was in 2015, 2016. I was living alone, a really terrible job that I hated. And then on top of that, some of my closest friends were being really shitty to me. I was kind of reaching a point of maturity, of like growing up, where I found the importance of like surrounding yourself with good people, people that were going to add to your mental energy and not subtract from it.
Correct.
You know? And it was just during this time that I was just struggling. I was depressed. And that New Year's, I'll never forget, New Year's 2017, I made myself 3 resolutions. And I'd never made a New Year's resolution before. But I just knew that I was at such a low point in my life that I made 3 promises to myself. One is that I was going to remove toxic people from my life. 2, I was going to start working out because I hadn't exercised in a long time. And 3, I was going to honestly open myself up to finding someone who loved me. I wanted to find somebody that I could truly have a loving relationship with. So I stopped talking to my toxic friends, right? I made a point that they weren't a part of my life anymore because they didn't deserve to be a part of my life anymore. 2, I did not start working out because I'm a lazy piece of shit. And then 3, in early February, so no, it was late January, so maybe 3 weeks later, Annie and I connected for a coffee date. And we sat down, and the coffee date turned into like an hour and a half of just talking, and we just connected so well that I realized, like, oh my gosh, I've got to try to see this girl again. So we started going on date after date after date, and just it was so easy and perfect. I think we both knew within the first couple of weeks that like this was going to be a really serious thing. And then that was her senior year at Vanderbilt, right? I was still in Nashville. And we got through to like her graduation and basically said, she's told me, hey, Tripp, this has been great. You know, I've really loved getting to know you. I think we have something really special. I'm moving to Houston, so see you later, is basically what she said. And keep in mind, 2017 is when I had just started at Edward Jones.
Right.
Oh,
So
yeah,
during
right,
that, I met her like during my transition from UBS to Edward Jones.
I see.
And so I was like, they have a 6-month program when you first join that you are building your office location. They give you a space. They give you like a spot on the map. You build a plan to find clients, and your strategy is for that place. And so when she told me that she was leaving for Houston, I talked to my regional manager, who had pulled a lot of strings to make sure that I was in it. He really wanted me in his region. I talked to my regional manager and I said, hey, you know, I appreciate everything you guys have done for me. I know that I've put a lot of legwork in to the Middle Tennessee area, but there's a girl, and I've just got to see where it goes. I cannot forgive myself if I let her slip away. I'll always be asking. And again, Edward Jones, fantastic firm. He immediately said, I'm going to do everything I can to find you a spot in Houston.
Oh, wow.
So he called the regional leader down here. They set up an interview with me. They loved me. And that was that. My office moved down here. I started over. I started from scratch again. But I moved with Annie, and the rest is history.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So you explored Houston as a wealth manager, like.
Yeah, absolutely. And my career depended on it, right? But that was also great because it turns out Houston was the #1 target area for the whole nation in Edward Jones. They were like, this was the city where they had identified the most opportunity. And so they were like funneling a lot of resources in to try and develop the Houston area. And I got in on the ground level of that. Like, it was perfect timing.
Awesome.
Yeah. So it all worked out.
Had you been to Houston before the thing?
Only in the airport.
Oh,
only in the airport.
Wow.
Annie put together, because she's from the Woodlands, so she grew up around here.
Okay.
She made a PowerPoint of all the wonderful things about Houston and why I should move there. It was like, you know, the best food in the nation, you know, big city, great sports teams. She was selling it hard, man. And she got me. Good tacos, like Tex-Mex, unbeatable.
That's true.
So you reconnected with Annie. You'd met her back in school, right?
We knew each other from school.
Right.
We were like acquaintances, so we were friends of friends, basically.
Right.
I think we both kind of had crushes on each other from afar. And so when we reconnected, it was just sort of we'd always both wanted to maybe go on a date with each other, and now was the chance. And then it went perfect. We found out we had so much in common. It was just perfect. It was like a storybook. I'll never forget. My birthday is February 4th. Our second date was on my birthday.
Oh. Oh.
And those toxic friends that I mentioned abandoned. They knew my birthday was coming up. They planned a trip out of town on my birthday weekend and without inviting me. It was that kind of a toxic person, right? Yeah. And so I was okay with it at that point. I said, well, fuck you guys. I'm going to go on a date with Annie. I wanted to see her anyways. So we went out on a date, didn't tell her it was my birthday. We just had a great time. And the whole time we were like walking around downtown Nashville, and just random people would walk up to us and say, you two deserve each other. You two. There was a homeless man, I remember, who, as we walked past, he just grabbed us and said, I just want you two to know you're the most beautiful couple. I want nothing but the best for you. And didn't ask for money or anything, and he left. Like, he just wanted to tell us that, right? So we always joke about that like the homeless man in Nashville knew we were going to get married before we did.
And that was your second date?
That was our second date, yes. She... we had originally just like scheduled another little coffee thing to sit down, but I told her it was my birthday, and she said, Tripp, I'm not going to let you be alone on your birthday. And so she took me all around Nashville and like got me ice cream, took me to somewhere else, and she's just a sweetheart. Yeah,
she is. So talking about mental health, do you think you made the right decision, and how do you feel in your head right now?
There is no doubt in my mind. Every day, I feel more fulfilled, right? Not to bash my previous career. I think a wealth manager is an amazing career path. You help people. You truly help people in that job. But I just knew that it wasn't me. I feel now that I'm in the right place. I really feel fulfilled and excited about the future. And even on the days where I am bone tired and working so hard and coming home from teaching lab, at 9 o'clock and driving back home, even then I just feel really satisfied. Yeah. Can you guys relate to that?
Yeah.
It's a great feeling, to feel like you're where you belong and where you're the path you're supposed to be on.
Yeah. That's a good feeling.
I totally agree.
It's a good feeling to have.
Yeah. Yes. And I'm 30, so I'm old enough to have made mistakes, and I sort of know what I want out of life. I know the kind of people that I want to be around, and that has really contributed towards my own happiness and mental health. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's important, I think, especially when you're in academics where there's not a lot of money. So I feel it's extremely important to, at every point in your life, to feel passionately about what you're doing, to be always feel that you're in here for yourself, is what I feel. You're not here for the money. You're not here for the fame. You're just going to be here because you feel that you get to wake up every day and do what you want to do.
Yeah. Absolutely. And academia is sort of an incremental progress, right? You spend a lot of time to make that small step forward.
Yes.
And so you've really got to believe in like the academic institution, like the science community as a whole, that we're working for the greater good, and I'm contributing my small part, right? I don't feel the need to totally change the world anymore, like I did back in undergrad, right? Yeah. It'd be nice, but...
So why don't you tell our listeners, what are you working on these days in physics?
In physics. So I've just recently joined Professor Vovchenko's group. He's in the nuclear theory department, or the nuclear theory group, working with Claudia Ratti. He specifically has been working on HRG models, which is hadron resonance gas. It's a way to model nuclear matter, QCD matter, with partial pressures of different hadron species, for those physicists that kind of know what we're talking about here. He's made some very innovative changes to add van der Waals interactions. So basically not using an idealized particle model, but giving a hard shell, giving some interaction constant between the hadrons, which has had some really promising results on observables like proton cumulants. And so we're going to be working on expanding that model. It's at the very early stages. There's a lot of improvement to be made. And so hopefully we can expand it to really model a phase transition, right? That's the goal of QCD, right? Is to find the critical point and the line of first order. So that's what we're working on.
That's right.
And is QCD the area that you thought of working in when you started your where you thought that you're going to start your PhD?
It absolutely was not.
Okay.
And when I first came into the PhD, I'm not sure I know that I didn't appreciate the full scope of physics, right, of modern physics.
Yeah.
I definitely came in wanting to work on unification theories. I'd studied a lot of relativity on my own, and I still love the framework of relativity. I mean, it's just beautiful elegant math. And so I really wanted to, I'd been reading like Kaluza-Klein, and I really wanted to work on extending the standard model into unified theories. Now I am very glad. I mean, that's still an interest of mine. I'm interested in holography. I'm interested in ADS-CFT and just extensions of gravity. But as a physicist, I'm so glad that I am where I am because I'm learning unbelievable things about QCD that I never would have gotten anywhere else. And at the end of the day, everything's connected.
Right.
Oh, yes.
Exactly.
That's what it is.
You've got to know it all.
Yeah.
And so I'm just gaining all these great skills, and I'm really excited to continue learning from Professor Bovchenko. I think he has not only just knowledge of physics that I can learn from him, but knowledge of softer skills like computational methods and how to approach a project, right? How do you take a project from beginning to end? So I'm hopeful. I'm very hopeful for our future together.
So in physics, it's like a mountain. You know, when you're at the bottom, everything seems, so distant. But when you climb up, you see that, dude, everything's connected. Especially with, the concept of dualities kicking in, it's just, everything's basically everything. So you can, switch between systems, very easily, very quickly.
And I feel that's a very good example for people who are just starting out their PhDs, that when we're in undergrad and when we're wanting to do our PhDs, we always have this one specific thing that we want to do. But when we go in, we realize that, you have to be extremely flexible. Otherwise, you'll not get anywhere. And this is like a really, really good piece of advice for everyone that, it's important to find where your passion is, but it's also important to know that your PhD is not going to be your entire career.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's just a way to learn, to do research, to work in groups, and especially, like you said, to find a way to fund your project.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, that's a fantastic point. And I think a huge part of that, the people that I've seen benefit the most from the PhD program so far of our classmates are the people that have a humble mentality and are in the mindset that I'm here to learn from the best, right?
Yes.
And so it's so easy to come in with, I'm going to work on this thing and I'm going to revolutionize this specific field because that's what I've always wanted to do, and lose sight of the fact that we're surrounded by experts in all these different fields, and we have 4 years to juice them for as much knowledge as possible, right? So that's, I ask a lot of questions in class. I don't want to miss the opportunity to suck some knowledge out of these professors.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because apart from knowledge, they also have experience in the field. And I remember whenever a new semester starts, we have this Women in Physics lunch. And at that, a lot of our professors tell us that, when we were in grad school, we wanted to do this. And then you see that they're not doing this. And they're completely happy.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like when you get into the field, you realize that what you wanted to do, you can still do that. But there's always a time for that. And if you're just finding a good project, a good group is I feel a good group is more important than having what you want as a project. Because if you don't have a supporting group...
And an advisor.
An advisor, yes. Yes, for sure.
For sure. Yeah, you need to surround yourself with people that will help you grow.
Yes.
That's not just in your career path, but in life.
Yes.
It's so important.
Yeah. I mean, your advisor is solely responsible for your transition from a student to a researcher.
Yes.
That's very important. I mean, he has to literally hold you and,
drag you over the line.
Drag you over the line.
And yes, like you mentioned that a lot of our classmates, the ones who've benefited the most are the people who have been extremely flexible. And they've not come with a preconceived notion that this is what I'm going to do and I'm only going to do this. And on the other hand, there are people that we know in our class who've been very adamant in, no, I am not going to do anything else but this. And they're the ones who are suffering the most.
Yeah, it makes it really hard to find a path forward.
Yes,
you know, everybody has to compromise a little bit.
Yes, of course.
That's the truth. Yeah.
I mean, in my opinion, the primary goal of a PhD is to make you a problem solver, not to solve a specific problem. So very rarely someone who starts off as, let's say, I've seen a lot of people starting off as astronomers or string theorists are not doing anything remotely related to string. They're doing biophysics and, you know, these are incredible subjects too, but then, you know, they decided to be flexible and kind of transition into different fields. So the idea is to, you know, learn how to find literature, solve problems, and enjoy what you're doing rather than, hey, let's do this. I mean, it's good to have goals because, I mean, like you, even I would want to kind of, you know,
find unified theory.
That'd be nice.
It's the dream. But yeah, I mean, throughout learning physics, I've learned that, you know, it's good to learn how to solve different problems, and then it makes it easier to find connections, to be honest. When you learn different systems, you can immediately, you know, it clicks in your head that, oh, I've seen that equation somewhere else, and then boom, they're connected.
One thing that I've really taken to heart as a graduate student is how beautiful the language of math is, right? Math is the language we use to express our thoughts, but at the end of the day, it's the only language that speaks back to us, right?
Yes,
that's I mean, you look
very nice way to say it.
You look at Maxwell's equations, you know, they came out in the 1880s, right? Everyone thought this perfectly describes electromagnetism. We know everything now. But buried in those equations was special relativity, the wave equation, right? You know, arguably things like axions, right? Axionic particles. And so all of that was there in the 1880s. It just took 40 or 50 years for somebody to churn it all out, right? Well, maybe like 30 or 40 years, right?
It was one of the first realization of, it was one of the first unifications.
Yes.
Yeah, electricity and magnetism kind of came in together, and Maxwell did like the greatest job ever.
Right. But yeah, I guess the point being that learning the scope of other fields, not only does that give you a good foundation in broad physics, but you see the same patterns happen over and over.
Exactly. And that's very important.
So important.
Yeah. In order for an idea to kind of click in, you need to know, like, you know, your horizon should expand. You need to know other things so that you can draw. So this is precisely what's happening with computer science. Computer science has found its way into physics like so peacefully and harmoniously, like none other subject has. I mean, it's right now you can't even think physics without computer science. It's everywhere, like, you know.
No, and it wasn't that way when I was an undergrad.
That's what I'm saying.
Even 10 years ago, people weren't really using AI or machine learning. Now, everyone's trying to solve with machine learning.
Oh, yes.
You know?
Yes. So,
and the spread is so fast. Like, I remember in first semester, we did not have anything like ChatGPT. And in second semester, it's like, it's always been there. Why haven't we been using it? It's always there.
I was reading the other day, some high school teachers have resorted to grading with ChatGPT. Aren't even reading their kids' essays or anything. Just plug it in, like 1 through 10, what is this?
I mean, Vovchenko tweets about submitting your exams to ChatGPT.
Yeah, he always gives the standard.
70% or whatever.
Yeah, he always compares. He says, if you do better than ChatGPT, you should be proud of your performance on this exam. Yeah.
So, talking about solving the grand unified theory, I'm sure everyone, when we start doing our PhDs and when we start deciding our futures, that we want to be a physicist, we always think that we want to be the greatest physicist of all.
Of course. We always expect that we're going to be.
Yes. And then when we get here, we realize, okay, good is good enough. But my question to you is, and I'm sure everyone has already thought of this question, that have you ever thought that what if you are unable to become a good physicist?
Oh, absolutely. So when I was paying for my classes out of pocket, I was proving to the university and proving to myself that I could do it. I was basically saying, hey, I'm going to wager my $5,000 that I'm paying tuition because I think that I can crush this class and be a physicist. And like, I'm going to prove it to myself. I'm going to prove it to the administration. And that's what I did. But I can tell you that when I first came into the program, you see people who, I mean, you guys are a perfect example. You guys came in from a really advanced course of study. You knew things like holographic, principles, and you had studied string theory. I was coming in worried about being able to do integrals, right? And so there was a moment where I knew that I was going to have to work really hard, and I knew I was going to have to prove myself that I could handle it. Luckily, those first semesters, I feel like I really did. I was top of my class in a number of subjects, and I just gained the confidence that, yeah, I can do this. If I set my mind to it and I really make it my life's priority, I can do it. And now I've gotten to the point where at least the physics side of things is easier.
Yep.
It's coming more naturally. Even the math, I think at some point math becomes less of like solving something and more of like a natural way to express yourself, right? I think I'm kind of approaching that point, which feels really good. Yeah.
In academics, there's also, there's this notion about starting early, but then like you started, much, much later than a lot of people. Has that ever, did that ever,
Yeah, I mean, I feel a little bit like the dad of the class sometimes. There have been certain people in our class that ask me for advice, life advice sometimes, and I definitely, want to be there as a resource if people want to chat. Like, I'm always open to chatting with people, but it's not. It hasn't come to the point where you think that it's going to hold you back. No, right? So. No, I'm past that. That was a fear originally. I mean, I was afraid that I wasn't gonna be able to hack it, and that I was gonna encounter these problems that I just couldn't wrap my head around. Right? I think everyone is a little afraid when they start that, like, man, maybe I'm gonna encounter something that I just am not capable of.
Yeah.
Physics is not many people in the world can do it. Right?
Yes.
But I'm past that now. I mean, especially when we finish our foundational courses, I think we all realize, like, hey, this is modern physics. I just did it. Let's move on and do some research. I think we're all kind of at that point now.
You're right.
When Prachi and I were in our undergrad, we were attending this physics conference one day, and this great professor, we were talking to him, and then he gave us an advice. He was like, listen guys, if you want to do quantum field theory, make sure you do it before your 30s. What advice is that? So we did.
Good for you. Good for you. As someone in their 30s looking at quantum field theory, I'm like, shit.
I should have done this
I should have done this 5 years ago. Yeah.
It was a random advice, but I mean, I don't know, it had some essence to it. It was like, because after 30s, you won't be able to get it. I'm like, that doesn't make sense, but okay. I mean,
now it makes sense. I mean, I remember when we were in England, this professor of ours, he was so smart. He did his undergrad from Cornell and then his PhD from MIT. And then he was teaching at Durham. And he told us that I did quantum field theory. I took the course 5 times and I still don't understand it. And he was teaching us quantum field theory.
At different points in his life. So like an undergrad took this advanced course, in grad school it was like...
Well, we talked about that curve, right? He's bottomed out and he's coming back up. I think not a lot of people have reached that bottom yet where they can start making their way back up. I certainly haven't.
And now he's teaching quantum field theory too.
So he's super
his thing is
smart.
quantum field theory now. So.
Yeah, super smart guy. Yeah.
Well, so guys, I know that you are awfully busy. Prachi, especially you. It seems like every time I talk to you, you're taking on some new project or responsibility. So what does the summer look like for you guys?
A lot of things, actually. We've started this podcast. And we are actually, so like we were discussing before we started this, that we've met our advisor. We started on our roles throughout our research. And I feel pretty excited because, especially in theoretical physics, I feel we have a lot of freedom to choose our own paths, whereas in experimental physics, you already have a fixed thing that you have to do for your PhD. So for the summer, my personal goal is to find what areas I can tap into using my current knowledge of what I'm doing, and eventually find connections towards my goals using all those paths. So in terms of research, that's what I am at right now, because first year was so hectic.
Yeah.
We did not have any time.
Yeah.
But now, and now because we have a lot of time, especially, before we start fall. So I'm thinking to, just expand my knowledge a little about the fields that are happening, like currently in the hot spots, as we call it. And just find a way to get into those fields and reach those goals in the 4 years that I have left here.
That's a really good point that I hadn't really thought about before. But as an experimentalist working towards your PhD, there are well-defined observationals that you are trying to measure. Yep. And like the whole field knows that like neutrinoless beta decay, right? Double beta decay is something that would be really groundbreaking, and you should go look for it or try to prove that it doesn't exist, right? But as a theorist, we can go a lot of different directions, and it could very easily be a direction that doesn't pan out, right? We're trying to do new things.
And it's still a success.
You've got a...
You have a path that now doesn't work. So it's always a win-win situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just sort of an interesting. You've got to really think what path you want to go down, right? Because 3 years from now, whatever you start, you got to finish it, right?
But instead, in STEM altogether, you've got to be very okay with the fact that you can be wrong 10 years down the line.
And that's suddenly, a good result.
Yes. and that's good, exactly. So you should always think about the collective good of, that's what STEM teaches you, and I think that's incredible.
So looking back your life, is there anything that you would like to change now, if you could?
Oh, man, that's a good question. That's a good question. I'm so happy and fulfilled with where I am in my life now. I just feel really fortunate for all these blessings that have come my way, looking back from like my low point, right? I think that having those low points helped me grow out of it, right? I had to go through that to grow as a person, to realize what was going to help me lead a fulfilled life. So from that perspective, I wouldn't change anything. If it would have thrown me off from where I am today, I wouldn't change a single thing. But realistically, I wish that I could have done a little bit better in my last year of undergrad. I think that if I had been able to go straight into a PhD program, I would be maybe a professor right now instead of a grad student. But also, I wouldn't have a nice house in the suburbs. I wouldn't be married to a wonderful wife.
Yes.
I wouldn't be in Houston. I'd probably be in my hometown of Murfreesboro, Tennessee as a 30-year-old. So, yeah, I don't think I'd change anything. I think it's really helped me become who I am today.
Causality. So, do you have any advice for our listeners, for people struggling with something very similar, who have been passionate about something, but then life also happened, and then they had to do other things, circumstances required something else, but they're constantly they're fearing to come maybe back to school or do something else that they're passionate about. Do you have any advice for them?
Absolutely. I think that my story is really kind of proof that life is very long, and no matter what you're going through right now, there's a lot of time ahead, and you're in control with how that all plays out. Annie likes to joke that, no matter how bad things go, even if our marriage falls apart and she loses her job and her family disowns her, she could always just move to Costa Rica and start over, right? Like nothing's stopping you from doing that, right? So just don't lose sight of the fact that your life is in your own hands, and you need to do what's going to make you happy. You need to. The worst thing that could happen is making it 10 years down the line and regretting not taking a chance. So yeah, just be confident enough that you can control the direction your life is going. And then also a huge part of how I identify with myself these days is having confidence in yourself, right? Being proud enough of the way that you behave and the goals that you pursue that other people can't talk you out of it, right? you've got to have that level of self-confidence to really to go get it and make your dreams happen. Mm-hmm.
And lastly, what is the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
Best piece of advice I have ever received. So one was not necessarily a piece of advice, but really a mindset from my high school chemistry teacher. Was a huge influence on me. And he was the one that really inspired me to take my love of science and like I'm watching documentaries and I really enjoyed science and really focus it into, I want to be a physicist and I can do it, right? And he instilled like the true love of science and math in me. Wow. And he really gave me, we would sit and talk about philosophy. You know, we would read like, Whitman, right? And just discuss his philosophy and like stoicism and then talk about how that relates to physics and how that relates to the universe. And despite all of that, he was a deeply religious man. And I would, you know, to this day, he's one of the most amazing people I've ever known. So that was huge, just instilling that mindset of reflectiveness, love for science, appreciation of philosophy, coupled with you can still be religious. You can still care about other people, right? While having this, you know, love of science. The second true piece of advice that I ever got was when I was about to move to Houston. Annie was at my house. I was living with my parents in Murfreesboro. And they brought the U-Haul. I was packing all my stuff into the U-Haul in our driveway. And my dad pulled me to the side and he said, so you're doing it, right? You're moving to Houston. I said, yeah, you know, this is a big jump for me, and I feel like this is going to be a great way for me to start the next chapter of my life. He said, that's great, Tripp. Just know that if you move to Texas with this girl, you've got to be ready to marry her. And I said, Dad, we've been dating for 3 months. Give me a break. Like, we already talked about this, that like it's non-committal and I'm just going to try to start. And if it doesn't work, I'll at least be in a cool city. Like, don't put any pressure on us, Dad. Come on. Well, here we are. He knew what he was talking about.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
And I realized pretty quickly after we were living together that I was ready. At some point, we were going to get married. And yeah, he was dead on.
That's a very nice and a good note to end on. Thanks, Tripp, for doing this.
Of course. Well, thank you guys, and best of luck with your future guests. I know that I'm excited to tune in to see your future podcasts.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming, man.
Yep. Love you guys.